back, everybody. I'm here today again with Dr. Gabrielle Francis, the Urban Alchemist. And Dr. Francis is a holistic medicine practitioner. She's a naturopathic doctor, chiropractor, acupuncturist, and massage therapist. In our last meeting, we talked about her lifestyle when she was a doctor to famous rock and roll groups, which of course led to the publication of her book, The Rockstar Remedy, that I have here, that I'm holding up, that I encourage you to read. We also talked in your personal journey about three separate aspects to what you did. One was your personal journey that led to a Western style education, including getting degrees that would allow you to do this work professionally. Second, the rock star part of this. And third, the fact that during the tours that you would go on, there would be an active time where the tour was taking place, as well as downtime following that, when you had an opportunity to go to other countries and other cultures and study healing with these leaders. So that's the part that I'd like to focus our attention on next. Can you tell me a little bit about maybe the first time that you did that? And then we'll get into some other adventures.
So the first trip abroad was actually China. And I had a break from tour and I went to China to do part of my acupuncture residency. I went for 6 months, and that was a trip because it was in the year 2000. And so it was in a part of China called Chengdu, and it was still very unwesternized. And I spent 6 months there, and then I went to Tibet for 2 months after that. So my first trip out of the country was China, actually.
And would you describe, now that's maybe an exception to the rule in the sense that under communism, acupuncture sort of took on more of a materialist orientation. Would you say that's true?
It's still based on Taoism, really, the traditional Chinese acupuncture. And in China, it's practiced in hospitals. They have some hospitals that are just for TCM and some that combine. But back in that day, it was still fairly primitive in a way. Like the hospitals had doctors smoking in them and people cooking food in their rooms. And at the time, doctors were not using clean needle techniques, so they would take needles out of one person and put them in another person. So it was pretty shocking. And I was with a group of 20 people, and I'm the only one that stayed because people were so freaked out about that particular element. But I was like, I'm here and I'm in China and I want to see the way they do it here, you know? And really, you can't practice Chinese medicine the way they do in China because Western people really don't want to feel pain, and they're very intense in the way they do it. But I learned a lot of great things about the philosophy of Chinese medicine while being there, and it really pushed me to the edge on so many levels that I learned so much about myself, you know. But one of the coolest parts about being in China was you felt the kind of dichotomy between the oppressive aspects of communism, yet there's this really beautiful tradition of this harmony between nature and the elements and our health that's actually not just part of their medicine, but it's part of their way of living that people kind of talk about on a daily basis. So for example, somebody might be eating a food that's hot and spicy because they felt they had a damp cold condition in their body, which was some kind of viral condition. You know what I mean? So people could talk about the elements. They knew that if they lived in an environment that was damp and cold, they should be eating hot, spicy food. So, like, people knew that relationship between elements, the environment, the food they eat, and how it affects their health. That's just innate in their culture.
And the average person on the street is aware of that.
Yes. Yeah, it's just part of the way they think about things. And that's just something you really have to be there to see how it plays out, that it's part of normal everyday conversation.
And what about Taoism? How does that play into it, would you say?
Well, Taoism was like what the foundation of traditional Chinese medicine was based on. So all of the old books and traditions come from a Taoist belief. And still in the United States, if you're going to get your license in acupuncture, you have to have the traditional Chinese medicine system. And it's very, very philosophy based, very, very artistic in the way it's taught. Much more about the balance between hot and cold, excess and deficient, yin and yang, masculine and feminine, and all the elements than it is about the scientific part of things.
Excellent. Okay, so from China, you go to Tibet. Now, what was that like?
Tibet was like very heart opening. It was at that time, it was under communist rule by China. So there was an oppressive feeling. But what I really felt was the beauty and the spirit of the Tibetan people from their Buddhist philosophy, even though it was being fairly oppressed. And I went on a lot of pilgrimages there. I saw people practicing kind of Tibetan style of medicine, which really has its roots in ancient shamanism of that region called the Bone people. So Tibetan Buddhism is a mixture between Buddhism and this Bone religion, which was kind of a shamanic practice in that Mongolia, Tibet region. I loved the Tibetan people, but I did spend 4 days in a jail in Tibet, which was terrifying. I never understood why I was there. I was on a group traveling through Tibet, and we were taken by the Chinese military to these different jails. They put us all in separate jails. It ends up we were there for 4 days. I had no idea how long it was. It was to get money from us. When we got out, we were given the money. But I had this experience of thinking that, okay, I'm going to die in a jail in Tibet and nobody's going to know where I am. Prior to that, about a week before, I had a very mystical out-of-body experience when I was in the Potala Palace in Lhasa. And I saw my whole life kind of flash before me, a reel of my life, and my body separated from myself looking down. And the kind of thing that people say when they have a near-death experience. And it was really powerful. And I thought that, this experience happened because I was going to die. Luckily I didn't. And I got to continue on and ended up in Nepal. But, for your first trip out of the country, it was all pretty intense. And everyone's like, I can't believe you would actually want to travel after that. I'm like, oh yeah. I'm like, sign me up for the next one.
Well, when you were in Tibet and you were not in jail, you mentioned the Bone religion and the shamanic practices. Did you ever get to see any performative healing ceremonies while you were there?
Not while I was in Tibet, because they can't practice their religion there. But I actually got to see that more when I was in India, in the northern part of India and Ladakh. There is where the Tibetan medicine and healing and rituals are actually being still practiced today.
And what was that like?
I mean, it's amazing. They wear these costumes and these big masks, and they do these dances, and they're kind of acting out scriptures in a way, Tibetan scriptures. They're acting it out, performing it, going into trance. To be part of that was very powerful. And I got to see the Dalai Lama several times, very close, like in Tibet, in India, seeing him speak with millions of people. It was just phenomenal.
Wonderful. Well, in the last session, in the intro, I mentioned the countries that you traveled to, and I want to just go through them quickly. We have China, India, Thailand, Brazil, Morocco, Peru, Guatemala, Ecuador, Belize, Mexico, Turkey, Greece, Syria, Lebanon, Indonesia, Malaysia, Egypt, and Mali. That is a long laundry list of cultures and countries. And I'm wondering if you could share with us maybe just a highlight, an anecdote about meeting indigenous healers in a couple of those places.
I mean, what I've come to realize when I go to a different place, Bob, I usually try to go during a festival time. Okay, because what I've found is that if you go during a festival, whether it's a religious festival or a music festival, you get to see how the different aspects of healing intersect with each other. And what I've noticed is that these are the food and preparations of the food that are special for that ceremony. There's the healers will often prepare people for this special time of the year. There's beauty rituals that are often accustomed with it. There's spiritual rituals, and there's music and dance. And they all come together to tell a story about the people and the culture and their essence of healing. And I think some of the most beautiful healing I've seen has been in Mexico with curanderos, especially with our friend Laurencio and a lot of his people, because the Mexicans are very heart-centered, and just being with a curandero or a curandera and getting the limpia, the cleansing ceremony, and having somebody praying on you is such a powerful experience. And having that had myself and then seeing it on other people, for myself, it's been very heart-opening, and just makes me fall in love with Mexican people. You know how that is, right?
I do. And in our next section, we'll even go into more detail about that, because I want to talk about limpia and what it means about healing. But that's a kind of a preamble to what we'll do in the next one. So from that long laundry list of cultures, is there one country in addition to Mexico that stands out in your mind as this was something that really impacted me as a healer and in a spiritual way?
I mean, to be honest, they've all had such a different type of impact. Because like I said, there's an essence about each of these cultures. And I feel that after I've had that experience, when I go in, I want to meet the musicians and the healers, and often they're the same people, or they're in the same place at least. And I always have a takeaway, something that I feel changed about, something that touched me. In Mexico, I have that reconnection to my ancestors. In Morocco, I feel like there's this tribal community. Everything is done for the group, and there's this community-oriented feeling. In Brazil, I've taken away the healing of syncretism, of bringing two cultural stories together and creating a new story. In India, I had so many powerful experiences with the different healers and sages that I went to see during those times. So it's hard for me to say that there's one, but I bring some of these treatments back to my practice, and probably the most life-changing for my patients and for me has been the Mayan abdominal massage that I learned in Belize, Guatemala, and Mexico.
which is what? Because a lot of our viewers and listeners won't have the foggiest idea what that is.
So the Mayan healers, a very big part of their healing, besides doing their curanderas. They're mostly, there's male curanderos, but the curanderas are mostly midwives, and they work with herbs, and they do a special kind of massage, the Mayan abdominal massage. And it's a massage that realigns the uterus and the ovaries. And it's used to help balance hormonal things and all types of afflictions of the female pelvis. And they start doing that on girls as soon as they start menstruating. And self-care is a very important part of it. And I started bringing this technique back to my practice in around the year 2000. And it made me a fertility specialist for for gosh sakes, and I thought there's too many people in the world, and now I'm a fertility specialist. But it's been such an impactful treatment to be able to do for people, and to just see how that ancient technique can be brought here and practiced on modern people with such effectiveness. And then we're bringing that wisdom and love and compassion from those cultures to Western women. And hopefully we're giving them the love and compassion back.
Now, that brings me to a question that I've always wondered, and you're the perfect person for me to ask this. How curious is it that there is this form of massage that is specifically geared to the abdomen, and yet in Western massage, that is the one region that is completely ignored? So why is it ignored in Western massage?
I have no idea. I really don't. But actually, the Chinese very much focus on the abdomen. They have the Qine Sung. There's even a uterine lift in China. When I've been in Morocco, there were some healers out in the villages that were doing something very similar to the Mayan massage. They weren't calling it the Mayan massage. So I think that indigenous cultures innately know about the power of the abdomen, also the power of the female reproductive tract, so maybe that's a reason they keep it from us here. I don't know, but it is odd, isn't it?
It is. And what about men? Do men ever go for
the abdominal massage for men too? Obviously, it's not to align their uterus and ovaries, but they do it for more gastrointestinal support. And but they believe that the abdomen is the source of the vitality and chi. And I think it's fascinating because you would know this better than I, but isn't there a connection between the bloodline of people that came across Siberia, Mongolia, and down through the Americas? Is there a connection between Asia and the Mayan culture, from what I understand?
Well, so there are commonalities. Now, whether those are causal or not, of course, is the question.
Because in the Mayan medicine, there is so much similarity in many things to Asian medicine. And I also saw that in Peru with the Inca healers, that they have they talk about the chakras and the energy systems and the light bodies. And there's just so much of that Asian elemental element to it, that I always wonder, is it a connection that came through the Bering Strait, or did it come another way? You know better because you know all about curanderismo.
Well, I do, and I don't have a very clear answer for you. Sometimes there's independent invention. Sometimes people just spontaneously come up with similar practices because of the structure of what it is to be a human being. So we're going to leave that as a mystery today.
Okay, mysteries are good.
But we do have a lot to still talk about in terms of what is the healing process that we're going to cover during our third installment. So I'd like to say a big thank you to you, Dr. Gabrielle Francis, for joining us for this second session, where we really got to know a lot more about your personal journey among Indigenous healers. So thank you for being here for this segment.
Thanks, Bob. Thank you for being here with us too, people.